Hello everyone and welcome to Handing the Shame Back. This is a show dedicated to child sexual abuse survivors here in New Zealand and out across the world. My name's Gloria Masters and I'm your host. Each week we have an interview that is shared with you purely for child sexual abuse survivors so that they too can find the courage to find their voice and maybe hand the shame back as well. Please know that this content is disturbing. If you feel at all triggered during the show, please stop watching, go to the show notes and have a look where you'll be directed for some help. Okay, so today it's my absolute pleasure to introduce to you Laura Eustace. And Laura is a phenomenal advocate actually for child sexual abuse survivors here in New Zealand. She runs an Instagram account called the Flourish Project. And this is run from New Zealand. And she is actually focusing on sexual abuse, mental health issues like that, and has quite a following. But wait, she also... She raised $2,000 for help last year by creating 4 different t-shirts, and she's actually wearing one today. Support survivors. And she basically creates some stickers and hoodies as well. And this again is to raise awareness and support for our fellow survivors out there. As well as that, she was approached by Help to be their community ambassador earlier this year. So congratulations, Laura, and welcome. It's a pleasure to have you here.
Oh, thank you. It's such an honor to be on here. So thank you.
Oh, awesome. So look, we're just going to launch in and talk about you, what's led you to this and the phenomenal work you're now doing for us here in Aotearoa. So I guess, yes, your what's led you to this place at this time?
Oh, that's a good question. So when I was younger, when I was 9 years old, I was first sexually abused by my swimming instructor, which led me to, I guess, not really talking about what had happened. At that age, I didn't really understand what was going on either. There was a lot of pent up stuff that I think resulted in a lot of avoidance and not talking to anyone, and didn't feel safe to talk to anyone. Like I knew something had gone wrong, but I didn't know how to express that at that age. And funnily enough, I actually used that as like I blocked it out of my memory for a very, very long time. And it was only until I started seeing my psychologist 4 years ago that came forward from finally opening up about the sexual abuse that I'd encountered. So when I was 17, I was raped at a birthday party as well, numerous times, and have experienced numerous sexual assaults since then in my early 20s. There were lots of encounters that I had, which was the sexual harassment that you get, and it was almost like something that me and my friends started to get used to, you know, groping in the club, people just touching you in weird ways. I remember at age 15, I was at the Christmas in the Park at Auckland, and this group of guys had walked past, and every single one of them came past and groped my butt while they were walking past. And I remember being like, what the heck is going on? And then someone had an umbrella behind me and started prodding me right into my butt again and was laughing. And I turned around and I was like, what are you doing? And at 15, I kind of felt like all these things were kind of happening to me. And I was like, I don't have any power to stop that. And it just felt really violating. Like I kind of felt like my body didn't really belong to mine. And I guess leading up to before my rape, I had experienced really severe depression, which I think was in turn led from what had happened to me at 9. I think it was an accumulation of things that I felt like I couldn't really talk about, and because I had kind of blocked it out of my memory, there was a lot of things that I think had built up. And when I first went on the contraceptive pill to help with acne and things like that, that really kickstarted my depression, and a lot of things started to landslide from there. So it was quite hard, because I finally got to a point where I had attempted suicide and survived, and I had reached a point on my healing where I'd gone and seen a psychologist and had talked about everything, but I never talked about any type of sexual abuse. And then once I felt like I had reached this point, the rape happened, and it was something that I was like, I cannot talk to anyone about. And I had a friend with me that night. I didn't really know many people at the party, and I had a friend with me that night, and it was only until that same friend experienced sexual abuse of her own about a year later, and she came and talked to me about it, that I could finally admit to her what had happened to me. And that for me had felt like a massive relief, because for so long I wanted to disguise it as something that I had consented to, because I didn't want to acknowledge what had happened to me. I didn't want people to know, and I was scared of the ramifications of everything. And I think that really heightened a lot of my depressive thoughts again, and my anxiety, and just my inability to have really like safe relationships as well. Like I really struggled with my relationships, especially when it came to being with guys. And yeah, it was the first time that I felt safety in telling someone something that had happened to me, especially when it came to sexual assault. And I guess there was still this shame of really not wanting to tell anyone, because I was scared that, one, I wasn't going to be believed, two, that I'd be called a liar. And I think also because I'd had quite a few mental health issues at that point and mental illnesses, I was scared that people would just kind of bring it back to that. So there was a lot of, I guess, silence for myself, and a lot of really bad internal talk. And I guess fast forward until I was actually living in Sydney, and I was at university at the time. And while at university, one of my best friends passed away. And I was there during the process of when the ambulance arrived and finding her and whatnot. And that in itself was a really traumatic event. And it brought up my PTSD, which at the time I didn't understand. So it led to, again, a really bad downfall of anxiety, depression. The trauma got way too much. And what I didn't know at the time was a lot of the trauma from the sexual assaults was also flaring up. So I started to turn to alcohol, and I was abusing that so often. I think I was blacking out at least like 3 times a week, which was horrendous, and I just wasn't in control. And it also led to a couple more suicide attempts, one where I was very close to dying. I was put into an induced coma. I was then put into a psychiatric ward, and I was put under the Mental Health Act. So I wasn't allowed to leave the hospital. And it was only until my mum pretty much promised the hospital that she'd bring me back to New Zealand that they let me come back, or let me leave, should I say. And I came back to New Zealand. I saw the crisis team, and they said that I wasn't in crisis enough. And so I felt really let down. And again, I think a lot of the PTSD was starting to really ruminate, and that scaredness of not being believed and whatnot. And that was just coming through other ways, like not being believed for how severe my mental illness was at that time, and for the trauma. And it was only until my mum just happened to message my now psychologist and get me in with a session with her that I decided for the first time in my life that I would tell a professional everything, literally everything. So she was the first one that I told about my sexual abuse history, and through that we unpacked everything that had happened. And I was diagnosed with post-traumatic stress disorder, and all of the stuff that had happened to me from when I was 9 and onwards came up. And she was the first person that I felt truly safe to really open up about these things. And she was also the first professional to tell me about the ACC. And thankfully, I've been covered by ACC ever since. So I've had 4 years of therapy thanks to ACC, but
wow,
not thanks to the sexual abuse.
Wow. And listening to your story, wow, what a lot you've had to endure, and kind of try to deal with. And it's you know, phenomenal what you're doing now, which our audience, you'll just have to wait, but you'll hear what she's doing now. But the interesting thing, I guess, one of the things that leapt out at me was the ramifications when you mentioned earlier about, and they were mainly around not being believed. And I guess I wanted to bring that up because our audience as CSA survivors can probably all relate to that. And it seems to be a bit of a common theme. So I guess from your experience, you know, your own experience, as well as perhaps what you see out there now, how prevalent is that still, that feeling of not being believed among survivors? And
definitely probably one of the biggest things, I would say. It's one of the most common things that I've spoken to a lot of other survivors when I've spoken up about my own sexual abuse on Flourish, and survivors have reached out. They've also mentioned that that's a big thing that's held them back, especially when reporting or things like that. People ask them why won't they report or things like that. And also, I guess, the fear of, you know, the question that always gets asked of as soon as you open up to someone, I guess it's that stigma of like, well, what were you wearing? What were you doing? How much have you had to drink? And this victim blaming that comes through from it. And it's kind of like, it's crazy that that's the first thing that comes out of someone's mouth. And there's this interesting YouTube video that I've actually seen before where it's comparing like how people react to, say, when a survivor speaks up and when like someone that's just been murdered, like, oh, well, what were they wearing when they were murdered? Like, oh, were they asking for it because they was wearing a t-shirt that I want to be murdered or something like that? And it's just showing the hypocrisy between the two of where a crime has happened and something extremely traumatic, and the first thing that people get asked is, what were you wearing? And you know, firsthand, I have had someone closest to me say that they think that I was raped because of the fact that I had been drinking that night.
Oh, okay. So look, you're going to love this, and I'd love to say it's a Gloria original, but it's not. So listen to this. What percentage of rape belongs to the rapist? Answer: 100%. 100%. It doesn't matter what you were wearing, or whether you were so drunk you couldn't walk, or whether you were outrageously flirting. None of that belongs to you. 100% of the blame belongs with the rapist. So when you consider, you know, all the PTSD, the fact that as I track through what you have shared, there was a lot of prompting or shoulder tapping. You know, you withdrew into yourself. You were avoidant in your behaviour right from the 9-year-old situation. You know, the suicide ideation, the suicide attempts, feeling so depressed, unable to speak, you know, all of that kind of is nudging, isn't it? And it nudges survivors. Something's not right. It needs to be dealt with. What would you say was your moment of truth, if you like, or the moment in time when you thought, I've got to do something?
Probably when I first spoke to my psychologist. I lay a lot of credit to her because she has really helped me unpack everything, and every step of the way she has helped validate me. She has helped me understand why my thinking patterns have been the way that they have, and she's really pushed for me to understand that none of it was my fault and it's always been like that. And so I think that validation and that belief was just something that I think I struggled to believe in myself, and to have someone like just from the get-go just instantly tell me, like, I believe you, like, you're safe, you're here, like, thank you for sharing. That really helped validate me. And I guess I knew quite a few people around me that had also gone through similar circumstances. I know that a lot of them hadn't heard that either. And I think that was something that I looked for around me. And I think it was especially around the time where the Me Too movement came out, you know, you see people saying, oh, should I post a photo and say me too? Oh, but I don't feel comfortable doing that. And it kind of got to that point where I was like, that's because we don't necessarily see that many role models. And I guess from a generation where, you know, Instagram is quite prevalent for people my age, I saw it as an opportunity to talk to and tell people my experiences, because I hadn't seen other people talk about it. And I wanted other people to feel that validation that I had received from my psychologist, because I know that it's been a really big privilege to, one, have the psychologist that I've got and have such a great relationship with her, and even be able to afford and get the help that I've got. Even though ACC has covered it, I know that I in particular have had a really seamless experience with it. And I wanted other people my age and anyone else that could hear to know that they weren't alone in what they were thinking or feeling or anything like that. And I guess the more I opened up, the more reception I got from it, the more people would feel like they could talk about it. And I had so many people message me over time just saying, thank you so much for speaking up about it. I've always been too scared to talk about it, but seeing you talk about it has helped me talk to my mum, or helped me talk to a friend, or helped me acknowledge that I should probably go and get help. And I think also talking up about the experiences of things that I guess people don't even think will happen in the future. I mean, recently I was diagnosed with vaginismus and an overactive pelvic floor from the sexual assaults that happened 5-6 years ago.
Wow.
I've only just started to come up because I finally entered into a comfortable relationship and a safe relationship where I finally felt heard, and my partner treated me in what treats me in such an amazing way. And that's a reaction from the body that's been stored for so long. And now my finally able to relax. And it's kind of like, hold on, here's all that are starting to pop up. And I'm like, gosh, and like, I never knew that. And it was till like I think I'd complained to my psychologist for the 50th time that I was having really bad pelvic floor issues. And she was like, we need to go see a gynecologist. And so you can go see a pelvic floor physiotherapist. And I finally made that leap to do it. And it's one of those things where, again, it's so validating to hear that it's such a common thing, but no one likes to talk about it, or no one wants to acknowledge that, because again, it's such a scary thing to go and get even anything acknowledged to do with down there, because for so long I viewed it as like, oh, it's pain, like this is just normal, but it's not. And that's a result from it. It's kind of like all these fears that I had, I thought were normal reactions, but they're not. And it's just hearing that validation, and that's the validation I wanted other people to receive as well, and just to kind of feel like they're not alone. Because I guess when I was sitting in my bedroom so often crying myself to sleep, I felt so alone, and I didn't feel like anyone understood. And I wanted to share that, because the more I shared, the more people could relate and responded really well to it. And it was a two-way street. Like I felt validated from other people sharing their experiences, and I knew that I could help people even if they didn't respond to me. It was still getting shared. It's kind of like this platform, you know, you never know who you're helping. And so that's why I wanted to start it.
I think, and you know, you raise so many interesting things. I promise I'll try and keep up, but it's great. It's great. You know, one thing that just screams out at me is the body never forgets. So in a way, even though it's unpleasant and it's been painful and horrible, you know, pat on the back, the body never forgot. And how miraculous is that? And I'm even thinking about the 9-year-old Laura here. So, you know, if we keep quiet out of fear or out of shame, and we know shame is huge for survivors, what happens is that's all very well and good, and we can shove it down. And as you and I both know, the maladaptive kind of behaviors that we then exhibit scream out, really, don't they, that something's terribly wrong. But alongside that, we've got the body, which is the most amazing instrument, because it's also here to say, hello, something did go down. You didn't imagine it. You're not wrong. And I think that's quite vindicating as well. You know, the horrible thing for you, I guess, and for a lot of our survivors out there is that once we've kind of experienced some form of sexual abuse, it can be that then more and more occurs, and we can be left thinking, what? Why? And I guess I'm just interested, you know, you've been working with your psychologist. Do you see any links or any kind of being able to make any connections between some of the incidents that occurred and then repeated in your 20s?
As in, like, seeing the correlations from when I was 9 to...
Well, I'm thinking even the 17, you know, and then of course it kept happening, and there were lots more sexual assaults in your 20s. I guess I'm just wondering, yeah, were you able to make any connection with that? Or
I would say that's a hard one, because I don't necessarily think that I knew what had happened to me when I was 17 that was really wrong. And I think it was really hard to even say the word rape for a long time, to even acknowledge that. I think what was interesting was when this further sexual assaults happened, I remember instantly opening up to people, and I had some people instantly kind of say, oh my gosh, that's so terrible, are you okay, kind of thing. And I also had other people who did what I feared, which was, well, what did you do wrong, kind of thing. And I don't think that there was a difference in terms of not necessarily naivety, but it's interesting that majority of the sexual assaults I've had have been from people that I didn't know very well. The person that raped me at the party, it was someone that I'd literally met that night. And my last sexual assault was on a first date. So for me, I guess there is that fear now where I am quite apprehensive, and I have had social anxiety for many, many years. And I think that definitely has related to it. But there's been parts where I've met people and they've made me, I haven't wanted to let those experiences necessarily push me away from meeting people. And I guess there's always been that tug and pull for me of where I'm like, not everyone I meet is going to be someone that's going to hurt me in this kind of, but then there's also that fear for me, because I guess for a lot of majority, especially for child abuse at such a young age, a lot of them are from people that they know. And I guess for me, yes, I knew my swimming instructor, but I didn't know him that well. So I guess to me, it still felt kind of like a stranger. But like looking back, there's been one friend or former friend, should I say, who did sexually assault me, and I instantly cut that friendship off. I didn't want anything to do with it. But for majority of it, it has been strangers. And I think me has caused a lot more social anxiety, where like I am very much like, I like to keep my close friends close. And when I trust someone, I really do wholeheartedly trust someone. And so when that trust is broken, it's completely like goodbye. And where I do think a lot of the depression and the social anxiety has stemmed from a lot of that. And I think trying to explain that, it's interesting. I think even correlating it now in my mind as I say it out loud, I'm like, oh yeah, it makes a lot more sense. I get anxious, especially like in massive crowds. I hate going to big concerts. In the past, I would constantly get groped, or just I have this need of, like when I'm at a concert, I have to be near the back and I have to know where my exits are. Like it's that fight or flight feeling that comes up of, I need to be able to leave if something goes wrong. And I think this instilled fear of like never knowing what's going to happen. And I think that was also heightened, I guess, when my best friend passed away, because that was so sudden, didn't see that at all coming. And so there's this huge accumulation of just not knowing who to trust, not knowing when something bad is going to happen, and just this constant fear of something happening, because for me, it's been strangers. And I guess that's where it's kind of hard, because I love meeting new people, but there's also this fear of like, I'm scared of being hurt again.
Yeah.
That's been something that's been really interesting for me, because again, a lot of, I guess, people that I know that have gone through sexual assault, they've known many of their perpetrators, where for me, I haven't. So I kind of feel like a little bit of an outlier with that, because again, it's just like, I don't know who could do something wrong.
Yeah, I guess so, and I think it's a really useful thing for the audience to hear, Laura. So thank you. I think it's really useful. Not all, CSA survivors experience this from people they know. For some, it is a stranger, and for you, having had, several repeated offences against you from strangers. Solidifies the fact, and not only that, but there's still some commonality, just so you can come in from the outlining and join us, please, is this: the hypervigilance, the need to know where exits are, the need to feel, when I say in control of the situation, in terms of geographically where you're sitting, how you're positioned, who is closest to you. All of those things are hallmarks, actually, of hallmarks that CSA survivors can relate to. The anxiety you feel at times in those situations, 100%. Why? Because what have you had reflected and repeated and reintroduced to you? It's not safe. So I'm not surprised you're on high alert. And the good news is that right now, with what you've been able to overcome and work through with your fabulous psychiatrist or psychologist, is this: you now have a lot of situations, I guess, or experiences where you can replace the not feeling safe with. Actually, that was a great lunch with my friends and my fabulous partner. Or, oh, I really enjoyed that party. It was great at that, 21st or 30th or whatever it happened to be. So slowly but surely this will happen, and there will be more of those great experiences that might help reduce that anxiety, as you would know. So there's hope out there, audience. And Laura, in spite of all this, has managed to work her way through it amazingly well, to the point where she set up the Flourish Project. And I think, Laura, it'd be really useful to hear a little bit more about what you're doing on the platform.
So I first started off as a website blog because, as I mentioned earlier, I had come back from Sydney after a suicide attempt where I had nearly died. A lot of my friends over there knew what happened to me, but I guess they only had half of the story. And I wanted to explain and kind of share my experiences so that they could kind of get the full picture, because I think a lot of people hadn't known about my previous mental illnesses, about my sexual abuse history or anything like that. So I think it was like a big shock for them. And so I wanted to share a lot more of my story and not necessarily just be defined by what had happened with that. So I started to talk up a bit more about, again, what had happened to me in the past with my sexual assaults. I kind of did a post where I laid out everything that had happened to me over the years. And from there, I decided to transfer it onto Instagram because it was just a lot easier and it was more easy to do photos and shorter captions. So I found myself almost like, like a big blog is like a big, it almost felt like a journal. And I was like, maybe keep that as a journal and kind of maybe just do the key takeaways. And so from there, when I started to talk up more about the things that I was experiencing and the things that I kind of like, the takeaways that I was learning from seeing my psychologist and things, I would share that on Flourish, the social media. And I started to get messages from other great people that had also experienced sexual abuse. So I started to make some really good friends. I decided to do a series which was called Sister Survivor, which was an idea of where I think when people share stories of their sexual abuse, it's amazing to read. But what I find is when you talk to a survivor and they share what has happened to you and you share back like, wow, that's really amazing and brave, like I can totally relate. I wanted to have that aspect of where you had someone read your story, but then have that acknowledged and almost like peer them anonymously. So what I did is I got people to submit their stories anonymously, and I matched them up to someone, and they didn't know who it was, and they'd read their story, and then they'd write a letter of encouragement and empowerment back, just saying, hey, I can relate, and like I really find this amazing, like you're doing really great, I'm so proud of you, kind of thing. And I ended up sharing, I think, about 6 or 7, maybe 8 stories of that, and each of the participants, that again, they were all anonymous, but they each shared how amazing it was to hear back from a fellow survivor and actually feel acknowledged and feel like they had felt heard from someone that I guess truly understood as well. And for me, that was a really amazing experience of being able to see these amazing stories and seeing the amazing response to it as well. I guess a lot of people shared their stories in the comments as well, and how much they appreciated seeing a response.
Yes.
To see these terrible stories that these people have faced, and like the amount of strength that these amazing people had, and then, you know, to be able to see the response as well of just like what we're all thinking when we're reading it, like, wow, you're an incredibly strong person, this is amazing, like well done for working through this, you're not alone, I too feel XYZ. So that was a really exciting and really moving experience.
Well, that's really, really powerful, because not only are you giving people a voice, you're also giving them a network or a tribe actually to belong to, because we know that one of the hallmarks of child sexual abuse is feelings of isolation or different, but I'm different, I'm so different from everyone else. So what you've done actually is create this wonderful network where people feel supported, instantly believed, and therefore a little less overwhelmed, I suppose, and having to hold on all by themselves. And it's exhausting, as we know, it's exhausting. And Laura, for you, when you think about it, and for our audience out there, what are some of the things that you would say have helped you, or that you would recommend other survivors do in a way to kind of help move them forward and support their journey?
The first thing I would say is definitely to talk about it if you feel comfortable, whether that be to a friend or finding someone online that you see is speaking up about that kind of thing. I think talking for me has been one of the best things that I've done, just because, for one, it really helped me feel like I had taken a load off myself. And it was something where it was kind of like, you know, that saying of a problem shared is a problem halved. And for me, it felt really validating. And I think what's scary is that there's so many people I know that have also gone through similar experiences, but in a weird but wonderful way, it's so amazing to have that connection to people and, you know, feel that validation and feel like, you know, if something comes up, I can instantly have this network of people that I can go message and be like, oh, I was just diagnosed with vaginismus, and oh, this is really confronting, but it's also really amazing because it finally explains all of this pain that I've been feeling and XYZ. And I think another thing that I would suggest is, you know, if you are feeling pain anywhere to do with down there, and you have gone through sexual abuse, definitely go and see a gynecologist. It's something that I avoided for so long because, one, I was scared. I don't like any type of appointments down there, but I also know it's probably the most important thing. And for me, it was an act of self-love and self-care to really go and get that issue looked at, because I was in so much pain, and just knowing that I could work on that pain and it not last like that forever. But I just had to make that small step of making the appointment, turning up to the appointment. You know, I made sure I had a friend with me, and that made me feel more comfortable. Things like that. It was kind of like a reminder to be like, okay, this is what I need to do. And it was not just a mental healing process, but it's been a physical healing process as well, for something that I never knew I'd experience.
Yeah. I think the other thing too, though, as you're talking, is that, you know, because, you know, when we've, you know, CSA survivors, it's actually, it's shameful, but it's also scary, and it's also, you know, we're terrified something's going to hurt, and we've just been hurt so many times. It's just, it's almost a little bit protective, isn't it, of not actually wanting any kind of intervention or anything happening. So yeah, I think that's really, it's a really good point you raised, because it is that self-love and that self-care is key for survivors when we've been labelled as liars and making things up, not to be trusted, or something wrong with us. What else would you recommend? What else helps? Share with people.
What's definitely helped me is definitely finding a form of exercise that I find really helpful. So for me, I love HIIT workouts, which is high intensity training.
Yep.
But I also know that it can be very intense, but as a way of getting out of my head, I view that as like a really good way of like not only helping my mental health, but my physical health as well. And I first started off when I came back from Sydney, I first started off by finding a personal trainer, because I hadn't been doing exercise for so long, and I knew that I needed to get like into a routine and really kind of be back in my body and really feel a lot more attached, because I guess there's a lot of dissociation at the time that was going on. I just didn't feel connected to my body, and I knew I needed that slow introduction back into it. And for me, I was, again, very lucky to be able to afford getting a personal trainer, and I made that one of my priorities. Is I need to get back into it, and I'm one of those people where I need to be held accountable. So if I had someone being like, okay, we've got an appointment or like a training session this time, you have to turn up, then I'm like, oh, okay, sweet. Whereas if I set my alarm for 6 a.m. and say, okay, I'll go for a walk, I'll hit the snooze button 50 times. So I knew having that accountability would really help me. And my personal trainer ended up being really wonderful. I was a bit nervous, again, because I didn't know who he was or anything like that, but I had a recommendation from a friend that he was really good. And instantly I'd kind of opened up to him about everything that I'd gone through, and he also shared things that he'd gone through as well. So there was a connection there where I kind of felt like I could, I felt safe in that environment. And ever since then, you know, he started his own gym, and I moved into that gym, and I've been going to that gym for the past 2 years, and I absolutely love the workouts there. But I also know on days where I'm really not feeling up to it, I don't push it. I don't push my body when my body is saying no anymore, because I used to do that so often, to the point where I knew I was avoiding something in my head, but my body wasn't feeling up to it. And I think there was a time where it was thrashing it too much, and it was kind of like to the point where it was like I started to get even more chronic pain, just started to really exemplify. And I was like, I'm not listening to my body, and if my body's saying no, then I'm not being good to my body anymore. And so for self-nourishment, now I know not to do that, and I'll go for like a slow walk with my dog or something like that, or I'll go for a walk with a friend where it's, again, low intensity, or even if I don't want to do anything, like I give myself that space to be like, okay, I just need to relax, I just need to spend a day in bed today, and that's absolutely fine as well. But I have found that exercise and getting into a routine of whatever type of exercise you're feeling like, doing that to help not only your physical health, but like your mental health as well. I just being outside and going and doing a workout, or listening to your body and doing what feels right, absolutely amazing. And cold water therapy. I go for a swim in my pool, and any type of cold water, even like cold showers, absolutely amazing. It just really kind of gives that spritz of like, you're kind of shocked and your body is kind of re-regulated. And especially when I'm feeling really heightened or just really not connected, again, if I'm dissociating or if I just feel really out of it, I'll make sure I turn on the cold water and just kind of get that spritz to like re-wake myself up and re-regulate. And it really helps with my anxiety and just kind of feeling more connected to the body. And I think that's something that's really important of, you know, doing things that will help your mind and your body come back together, because for so long, I know as sexual assault survivors, so many people experience dissociation, and that's something I experience quite often, and I need to come back to my body, and I found ways that really help that.
Yeah, so there you go, audience, here's your challenge. Go and have a cold shower.
Yeah, or running your wrists under cold water.
Yeah.
That
But I mean, it's great. And dissociation's a very good thing, because I know at the beginning of our conversation, you mentioned that you'd blocked this out for many years. And, you know, we do know there's dissociation, but there's also repressing or suppressing. And I think, guys, what we've learned is that the mind will do that. It's almost like a filter across. So you can't see exactly or remember exactly what's happened until you are ready to face, and then it starts to emerge. So know this, please don't put pressure under yourselves if something isn't coming to mind. You're just not quite ready to deal with it. Trust the instinct that there may have been something there, and it will emerge when it's going to, when it's right for you. But there is so much, the physical exercise in terms of helping our survivors out there to, we're all, you know, on a journey of recovery and healing. You know, the talking, the writing, the Empower Me group. So actually belonging to a group that actually have shared, you know, shared experiences, again, is a little bit like the tribe finding. You know, people who have experienced similar things can be really profound.
Yeah, sure, for sure.
So yes, and Laura, tell us a little bit about, I know I mentioned earlier that you are now the community ambassador for HELP in New Zealand. Can you tell us a little bit what that involves for you?
So that coming up will involve helping spread the awareness for their Do Something Helpful campaign, which is taking place in May.
Yes.
What they'll be doing is throughout May, they will be doing trying to fundraise as much as possible. So last year during April, which is Sexual Assault Awareness Month, I created the t-shirts, the logos, and all the quotes that came along with it. I got people from Flourish to submit quotes and things that they'd like to see on a t-shirt. And so this year I will hopefully be doing something similar with a fellow survivor, a good friend of mine who I met through Flourish. And also I will be doing, my goal is to be doing 15,000 steps because I want to try and get my step count up and spend as much time with my dog. So that's what I will be doing to raising money for HELP. What they will be doing as part of the community ambassador work is by sharing my story. So I wrote up an overview of what I have gone through in terms of sexual assault, and they will be sharing that with the media, and I will be helping alongside their launch campaign as well. So their launch event that will be taking place. So I think that will be happening over the internet, just due to Omicron and whatnot. So yeah, it's just basically helping them raise awareness and as much money as possible, because the amazing work that they do for survivors is just incredible. And I wish I had known about them when I was younger and been able to receive the help, but the stuff that they provide, like the, you know, helping survivors through the court process. They have a Dear M community, which is for young girls. So in schools, they go and talk about consent, and also talking about just self-empowerment, which I find absolutely incredible. And they provide free counselling as well for survivors. So they provide incredible work, and they rely on donations to really help, you know, provide those services. And that's something that I wholeheartedly believe in, because I know without the help of ACC, I definitely wouldn't have been able to get the amount of help that I've had, not only through therapy, but through EMDR therapy, which is eye movement desensitization and reprocessing, as well as yoga dance therapy, which is trauma-informed yoga, which helps survivors to feel more in tune with their bodies and more connected and whatnot. So there's a range of things that ACC provides that I know not a lot of people can get access to because of their assessment process. So yeah, the stuff that Help provide is just incredible for survivors, and it's something that I hope more and more survivors are able to have access to, and they can have more funds to be able to do that.
That's fantastic. And audience, for you people out there, the help links are in the show notes. So yeah, please feel free to go and check them out and look them up, and they're available to help. Yes, so I suppose anything that's going to help support us, and we're also different in what we need, and sometimes we don't even know what we need, Laura.
Exactly.
and then we do. So I think it's all about keeping the conversation going. Having these conversations helps to make them a normalized conversation, which sheds light on this. And if we're about handing the shame back, we've got to give people a voice, and we've got to allow them to speak their truth. And interestingly enough, the most honest people I know are survivors. So there you go. For all that we are labelled, dishonest or deluded or, lying or whatever, the myriad of names you will relate, we can be called. We are also the most honest people out there. So I applaud everyone who's watching this. So Laura, just as we're coming to the end of this, is there anything top of mind for you, anything you would like to share with our audience out there?
I think a couple of things just in terms of things that I've thought of just off the cusp of further things that have helped me kind of understand trauma a little bit better is definitely the book The Body Keeps the Score by Bessel van der Kolk. I found that book really helpful in terms of understanding what trauma does to the body, and especially when, being diagnosed with vaginismus, it was really validating to see and learn about PTSD and how that can affect the body and how trauma can be stored, as well as the book Know My Name by Chanel Miller. That was a really, really tough book to read, but it's something, again, that holds so much power, and it really helped me validate a lot of the things that I was feeling, and, coming to terms of what a survivor looks like, and understanding that we don't need to hold on to that shame again. I think shame is something that, as you've mentioned, like, it holds us back so much, and it's something that I've really struggled with over the years and been scared of admitting a lot of things because of the shame that's associated with it. But reading that book really helped me understand that. And even the TED Talk by Brené Brown, where she talks about vulnerability and how, being vulnerable is really a strength, and a lot of the things, again, to do with shame, being vulnerable and being courageous by sharing your story and things, that to me was just so validating, and it's really helped me want to keep speaking up about things. And my biggest advice for people is to, if you can't talk to someone else about it, validate, you can learn how to validate yourself, and you can go online and you can find so many resources and other people who have experienced similar things, and you're definitely not alone. I think one of the biggest things that a lot of survivors feel like is that, they're the crazy ones, they're alone, no one else will understand them. And that's completely not true. You've just got to find that really good space on the internet or through your own connections and whatnot. There are people that will believe you, and you are believed, and, you deserve all types of healing, whether that be mentally, physically, and wholly. It's one of those things that I think, we can put as much emphasis on healing, but we really need to, understand that we're doing it not only for ourselves, but our past selves as well, and acknowledging that we're doing that so that the cycle doesn't keep going on and can't keep going ahead. And the more that we can kind of share our stories to others, the more that others will feel like that they can get the help that they need as well. And I think just reminding ourselves that, again, our stories can help others find or be that survival guide that others need as well. And it's just been the greatest thing for me to heal and to be where I am today by sharing my story. And you know what, like I've reached that point where I know and I believe in myself so much that I don't need the opinions of others. But it's always so amazing to hear that from other survivors of where they do believe you, and it's that instant gratification. But I'm at that stage now where I know that I believe in myself and I know what happened to me, and it's that self-love again and healing that's really made me feel like I'm finally at that place of really being at ease with it. And yeah, it's amazing to have gone on that journey of not only physical healing through the vaginismus diagnosis and things, but yeah, being on that mental healing as well.
And how powerful, and you know, so delighted for you that you're there and you've reached that place, because as we know, it's a tough journey, and it can feel, you know, crippling at times. So congratulations, and I know you're helping an enormous amount of people, and we don't know who you're going to be helping out there today, so thank you for that. So Laura, just hang on the line a minute, and I'm just going to finish up with our audience here. So audience, wow, isn't she amazing? So that's Laura Eustace from New Zealand talking to us about her experience and what she's now able to do in her life. For those of you who are watching out there, please feel free to subscribe and share this. You don't know who could see or hear this that may just find the courage to also hand the shame back by telling you their story. The more survivors we can help, the better, I think. For those of you out there who would like to be a guest on the show, if you are a child sexual abuse survivor, please go to my website, gloriamasters.com, fill in the online form, and we can have a conversation about that. For others of you, this is also in podcast format, and if you would like some free uplifting content, also on the website are some blogs that I do. So in the meantime, until we meet again, love and light to everyone, and look forward to seeing you soon.